If you are somebody who has been in the other areas, not necessarily tech area, you have a place within GRC, because at the end of the day, GRC is going to have
Let's start with what is GRC? Like governance,
Risk and
compliance. I want you to break this down for the audience.
When I think of governance, anything which is on the tone of the top, right? The ethical climate, the culture, your policies, all that comes into picture. But from a compliance perspective, it's making sure that you are basically complying with all the regulations out there. In order for you to do that, you have to understand what your risk posture is, what your risk is assessed with. I think that's where the middle layer comes in.
What is the trigger though for making GRC so prominent or significant right now?
One great aspect about GRC, it goes and touches every layer within the organization, right? From your procurement, legal, HR, finance, you name it, all the way to your operations.
So I've heard that many security leaders saying this, that I've bought like all the tools in the world that are needed for GRC, but I'm still flying blind.
Tools are basically an enablers for your GRC. It's not necessarily gonna make you secure, not necessarily make you resilient.
Can entire GRC be automated with AI? GRC isn't just audits and checklists anymore. It's becoming the operating system for connecting risk, controls, and strategy. Today, I'm joined by Vijay Santhanakrishnan from Williams-Sonoma to unpack how GRC teams are stepping into that role. Thank you for doing this, though. Really, man. Like,
Prasen.
this means a lot.
It's a beautiful place.
Let's start with what is GRC? Like governance, risk,
and
compliance.
yeah.
People keep hearing about this term. I want you to break this down for the audience.
Think of this more like a cascading one, right? From a governance risk compliance perspective, I guess one flows into another. When I think of governance, anything which is on the tone of the top, right? The ethical climate, the culture, your policies, all that comes into picture when we talk about that governance layer. And then you dive a little bit deeper into the risk layer. I think I'm going to come to the risk a little bit later. But from a compliance perspective, it's making sure that you are basically complying with all the regulations out there. In order for you to do that, you have to understand what your risk posture is, what your risk is assessed with. I think that's where the middle layer comes in from a governance, risk, and compliance.
Okay, if I am explaining GRC, governance, risk, compliance to an 8-year-old, what would I tell him or her?
If you put your kid who's 8-year-old in a school, and if you put a no bullying policy, I guess, that's more around your governance piece. And if you basically protect the kid from falling or getting hurt in a playground, that is more of your risk layer, right? And then the compliance layer is you basically having a fire drill or an emergency evacuation. How do you comply, right? That's more of your compliance layer. So that's how I would break down governance and risk and compliance for somebody who's
Awesome.
8-year-old. Yeah.
I really like that.
Yeah.
I really like that. Okay. So now you've broken down GRC as a term, right? Let's say GRC started as sort of like check the box kind of function. Let's talk about how that has changed and has become like more of a strategic function for organizations right now. What exactly people are doing with GRC right now?
In the past, I think there was a lot of tool mindset. People thought, hey, I buy this XYZ tool from the market and then my GRC is all done. I should be able to get the risk posture. But honestly, without process, you can have a good GRC function. So I think the mindset has shifted more towards the strategy, governance, processes, accountability per se, than the actual tool and technology. At the end of the day, tool and technology are more an enabler. If you don't get your process right, you're not going to be successful in your GRC function.
What is the trigger though for making GRC so prominent or significant right now?
There's a lot of noise that are going on in the industry, right? I mean, I think GRC is one place where you can get a broad risk view, right? At the end of the day, you have to make your risk-informed decision across the organization, right? I think one great aspect about GRC, it almost goes and touches every layer within the organization, right? From your procurement, legal, HR, finance, and you name it, all the way to your operations, right? Right where it touches all your layers. And I think it's going to have a risk inside. I think in order for you to prioritize your risk, whether you're on the strategic layer or you're in the middle management layer, or you're in the operation layer, I think this gives you a picture pane of where you wanted to go and what you want to do next. I think that's where GRC gains the seat on the table.
Okay. So if I were to ask you, come to a mid-market organization and try to implement GRC, what does that even mean, by the way, for a mid-market company, and how would you do it?
Understand what your business objectives are. Unless you understand what your business goals are, you're not going to be successful with the GRC function. I think if I have to give like 3 or 5 things that are important for a mid-market company to begin with GRC, I think your tool layer comes in at the very last aspect of it. The core part is basically putting in that governance layer, right? Getting the business objective, understanding what your risk are, what your critical assets are, and then diving a little bit deeper into assessing the risk, and then mapping your controls. Again, you can even use a spreadsheet. Right? At the end of the day, what matters is more your clarity and accountability from a GRC perspective.
Let's take an example of a fintech in a mid-market and wants to like basically implement GRC, and they have like a head of security. How would they actually do it? How would they go about it?
I think the first step in the process is to identify what your critical assets are. In order for you to do that, you have to do a cyber risk assessment, right? It's basically you understanding what your threats are or what your vulnerabilities are, assessing your impact, assessing your severity, identifying what your risks are, and then mapping it back to your controls. Again, at the end of the day, you don't have to go look out for the controls. You might have your own controls already. How do you leverage some of them that you have? Map your existing control. And then if you identify a gap, document that as a gap. And then there are a lot of frameworks out in the market, right, to begin with, right? There's NIST 853, there's ISO. There is also a lot of framework around COSO, which is basically for the financially regulated organizations and all that. So start with those framework, try to map your controls. And then the last layer comes in your technology layer, how you're going to enable it. Make sure you're having the ownership. Along the way, think through the ownership, right? Who owns the risk? Who owns the controls? I think that's going to go a long way. And then sustainment comes at the end, right? How do you repeat the process? How do you sustain it, right? How do you do periodic risk assessment to keep this more light? Yeah.
So I've heard that many like security leaders saying this, that I've bought like all the tools in the world that are needed for GRC, like risk assessment, vendor reviews, I don't know, like some other functions in compliance, right? But I'm still flying blind. Like, what does that mean?
That's a great question. I think with the plethora of tools that we have in the industry, whether it's GRC, internal audit, cybersecurity, I'm seeing a lot of places where things could easily fall apart. Again, tools are basically an enablers for your GRC. It's not necessarily gonna make you secure, not necessarily make you resilient, right? It's more the processes, the governance layer, the culture aspect of it comes in before. As long as you set all these baselines or the basics right, I think it's very easy for you to implement a GRC function or successful GRC function.
Not a lot of mid-market companies, or except the enterprises or SMBs, can hire all the program managers or GRC leads or folks like that, right? So how would they really implement GRC, and how would they do it?
I think the best way to look at it is making sure you identifying what your critical assets are, apps are, and then you assessing your risk, and then going back to mapping your existing controls or finding your gaps, and then going forward with it. Again, you don't have to have program managers around GRC, or you don't have to have the best of the breed technology solution to start off with. I'm not saying it's not going to help, but it is to start off with, to get the basics right, even to have the core basic controls within the organization, right? IT controls, whether it's your access control, change management, even your operation controls, to have that baseline set. You can still do it through your whatever tools that you have in your pocket, and then within your organization, and probably enforce it from there. It's what matters is most the accountability and the ownership.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. So for folks who are kind of like leaning towards security right now, like aspiring security professionals, for instance, let's say, and who are not technical or don't want to become security engineers or get into the incident response side of things or any particular vertical in there that falls into the security stack, would GRC or risk be a good path for them?
Absolutely. I think it's more than good. I guess it's more strategic for them to be part of this risk space, right? In the GRC space. If you really look at it, right, from an industry standpoint, I think one place within the cybersecurity org where I've seen people from all over the different undergraduates, right? Whether they're from law, whether they're from business administration, information technology, finance. I think they all fall into it because GRC has this layer where you should be able to map your security risk into the business value. In order for you to do that, I think there's a lot of business acumen required. So there is a whole lot of diversity when it comes to the skill. I think this is one area where people can tap in to get into this GRC industry.
So what would be the starting point for them?
That's a great question. I think for me, I'm going to give you like top three things that I would do if I wanted to start a career within GRC. I think there is a lot of reports out there on the market. When I say reports out there in the market, financial statements. Name a company who's public, and you wanted to go look into their 10K reports, which they call it like the annual financial statement, and where there will be a lot of emphasis. There will be a section of there where it talks about their cyber disclosures, where it talks about the cyber risk management, their way of handling material incident, what are some of the third parties that they work with, how's their risk management appears, all the security and controls, the posture of security controls and all that. I think that's one area I would go tap into. And then there is also an internal control section within that 10K where you can 10K report, where you can go and look at the financial controls within the organization. If you're more business savvy, I think that's one place to start with. And vendors also produce a lot of SaaS vendors out there in the market. We produce something called SOC 3, which is a report out in the market, which is public, which is accessible for everyone to take a look at it, where people can go and look at the security and controls within the organization. Then think through, look at all that, dive deeper into an area. Maybe you're more passionate about network, maybe your network security, or maybe you're more passionate about identity and access management. You can learn about it and go forward and pick a tool, whether it's cloud, and go from there. I think that's one area to go start all of these. And then basics of control testing might help too. Again, with all this combination, if you're put in front of your, prospective employer, it's all going to add value.
How did you start? Like, what is your journey be like?
For me, I went to school for computer science engineering. I pivoted really quick because I felt like the focus of interaction and integration with business is something that ticks me, that motivates me. I was looking for that layer within the tech area. I thought security and controls and risk was one space where you get to interact with a lot of people in the business. I think that's how I pivoted towards this industry, and I started applying for the jobs within that industry. Start off into an application security role, and then quickly I had a lot of mentors and bosses who were more on the GRC and internal audit space. So they kind of, mentored me and thought, okay, with my security skills and getting to know the risk and control thing is a perfect intersection, and it's a niche area, I thought. And that's where I gravitated towards this journey.
Is AI helping anywhere?
Yeah, AI is going to help a lot. I'm thinking if you really look through it from an internal audit perspective, a lot of things that we do is more a point-in-time activity. I think if you really think through it, I think we spoke a lot about risk assessment, right? When I say risk assessment, most of the organization, they do it at a point in time, right? Like they start a once a year enterprise risk assessment. From there, they look into their audit universe, and then they plan their audit plan for the year, saying, hey, these are my high-risk areas that needs to be audited. But with AI being in the mix, I'm thinking this is going to be an ongoing and real time and able to detect anomalies, the organization to quickly pivot to the high risk areas. I think that's where AI is going to help. And also on the other aspect of it, right? If you really traditionally, if you think through GRC and internal audit, it's more of control testing. And again, those are the places where you can really help AI and agentic AI to automate it, where you can take a lot more strategic, you can add a lot more strategic value looking through the high risk areas, or add value there where your AI can focus on a lot of your routine task, automating that.
Got it. For somebody who is, let's say, trying to explore the risk or the compliance or the audit side of things, right? And AI is a great tool for them right now, especially in terms of consuming information and augmenting a lot of the basic stack that the GRC has, right? how could they like apply themselves on top of it to learn faster or look out for the right areas to get into?
That's where AI is going to help from a lot from a reasoning and mapping perspective. I think some of the things that I told you from a career path standpoint, right? Looking into the financial statement reports for cybersecurity controls and risk management framework that an organization has to get a perspective of what is out in the market, what are the risk factors are, how does your financial internal control looks like, and the framework. I think to get a lot of appreciation and for some of those things, I think you can still use AI to leverage AI to get all that mapping. Like you said, sometimes it might be not easier for someone to go onto that reports and map all that, right? But if you have AI with you and if you ask it to map your financial controls and cyber controls in your 10K to your framework and paint a picture, or right, that is going to help from an AI standpoint. And then I think people can take it and dose it from there.
Can entire GRC be automated with AI?
Not really. I think there is always this human element to it. In my mind, I mean, people are talking about human in the loop, human in the feedback. I think there are a lot of organizations are working towards setting up policies and things like that. I think there is still an element of judgment. I think anywhere there is an ethical consideration or anywhere there is an empathy attached to it, or even in doing a lot of strategic initiatives within GRC, I think that's where a human element comes in.
So, what are some of the
Within
pieces
GRC.
that could be augmented by Gen AI right now for GRC?
Definitely in mapping out the controls for the risk, I think that's one area that it can do. And then the other area that I can think about is the risk assessment, where it could be very ongoing with all the data out there, them easily assessing and pivoting the risk assessment and showing you the higher risk areas. There you can focus your budget, whether it's a security team or internal audit team. They can go on and look at the report from an AI perspective. The third thing that I can think about is the control testing, which is a huge thing. Anyone in the audit or anyone in the GRC space, they might always, I mean, there's always this area where people are not too happy about doing those testing and samples and all that. I think that's one area where you can even go to a point where you can do 100% of testing to detect anomalies. No longer you have to test your 5 samples or 10 samples, it would be 100% testing. I think that's one area where I can like really, really help.
Got it. You've done like auditing in the past, and now also you're running the internal technical audit for Williams-Sonoma. What does that include? Like, what does your day-to-day look like?
My role day to day is to make sure my organization is secure and resilient. At the end of the day, I think that's all people are looking for, right? You can have the greater framework, you can have map your controls, you can test your control, but unless you look at the forward-looking thing that we spoke about, unless you look at the emerging risk and making sure you protect your organization around it, I think that's where my core objective is. What that means to me is to look for the high-risk areas and then auditing against it, coming up with proactive solutions, control points to secure it, even before an security team or even before another risk management team figuring out what the issue is, you putting that control points, you enabling this control. I think that's what my day-to-day looks like, right? Working on different projects.
Are you like working towards a specific goal, or is it like continuous basis that you try to map your objectives to this secured organization?
I think any GRC professional, right? Like I said, the bottom line, making your organization secure and resilient. But people are going to work on different initiatives, right? Say, for example, if you're a company who operates in Europe, you're basically going to look for all your GDPR thing. What does it mean? You have to enforce all your data security controls into look at your data risk and then map your data security controls in your GRC system, making sure you check the design of the control, making sure you check the operating effectiveness of the control. You might have to work with an assessor or a certification authority, to file it and certify it, right? Otherwise, there's going to be a huge reputational risk there, or there's going to be a legal liability to all that. So things like that, there's various initiative a GRC professional would be working on within an organization. Again, like I said, the excitement piece is you're going to work with cybersecurity, you're going to work with internal, you're going to touch every layer within the organization. So it's going to give you a perspective of how an organization operates top down.
Awesome, awesome. So if I am trying to explore GRC as a space to lean in, and I'm just like I'm a young professional who's just curious about it right now. What is like one actionable thing that I can do today to like help me with in this journey?
I think I'm gonna talk about like two at least. Like I said, I think I'm going back to the same thing, right? Figuring out some of the statements that are produced by the companies, right, which has the cyber disclosures and internal control disclosures. And then there is a lot of publicly accessible frameworks out there, whether it's NIST 800 or COSO framework or ISO 271, which gives you a pretty big perspective of risk management, security, and controls. I think that's all going to help. And then taking a step deeper and getting into the process layer, right? When I say process layer, understanding about network, understanding about your application or database. With all that, I think you're going to have a solid foundation to explore into this industry.
What would make GRC interesting for someone? Like, why would someone enter GRC?
I think there is a sense of purpose in terms of what we do, how we do, in terms of protecting your organization from the risk and making sure it is, secure, making sure it's resilient, making sure it kind of the ethical areas are checked out. When I say ethical areas, more like from a compliance perspective. Yeah, right. You're operating in a very fair and an unbiased and transparent way. So that's something key thing that I can think of. And then the second area is like I spoke about it before. If you're somebody who has been in the other areas, right, not necessarily tech area, engineering area, if you're in the legal or if, business side of the house, informations, systems or whatever your business degree is, I think you have a place within GRC because at the end of the day, GRC is going to have a lot more layers, getting to know the different business processes within an organization, identifying what the risks are, mapping controls, making sure those controls operate effectively. I think those are the area that's going to gravitate you towards this industry. There are a few things that I can think of from an organization perspective, like PCI, for example. You protecting your payment card holder information, right? That means you're protecting all your consumer information. That's something you can obviously accomplish through GRC. That sense of purpose is always there. But again, at the end of the day, a lot of ethics and regulation and compliance out there is making sure how do you make this world a safer place to live. I think that kind of resonate with a lot of people out of the world. I think that's one reason why people would navigate towards this GRC area.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, my first interaction with like compliance was that when we had to do SOC 2 for a startup, that is the first time I ever came across compliance principles.
Controls, yeah.
And
That's a
the
huge
people who were working with me to do that, right, were quite detail oriented. And they were quite sharp about like the processes and things that we have to do. So they were really systematic, really sharp, and really detail oriented in doing the work. And that was like, this requires a certain trait.
Absolutely.
You have to be quite methodical, right?
Absolutely.
In learning about things, sort of like having like an OCD, right? About things.
I mean, I don't know if it's OCD. In my mind, it's like this is one area where you need to have a bird's eye view. Let me put this way, right? When you say bird's eye view, you're going to have a 30,000 foot view of things, which is going to be more strategic. At the end of the day, if you want to be in the details, they call it bird's eye view. You might have to have that too, because you're going to go to that level to make sure things are, in the right place, right shape, right form, and you're making an assessment out of it.
Maybe one angle I can take is also, if you want to be a CISO, it's better to actually have GRC as a great background, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one area. Honestly, I think there's a lot of CISOs out there in the market where their background is heavy on GRC. And I think in order for you to put the business and technology together, somebody with the GRC background might be a great fit.
Why is that? Like, why do all
because they can articulate things. I mean, at the end of the day, without aligning with the business, if you don't make your taxonomy right, if you don't like high, medium, low, what does that mean to a business person, right? If you say, hey, I have 10,000 vulnerabilities, I don't think anybody in the business is going to care about it. If you're going to say, I have an high asset risk, which is going to bring down my revenue, or there could be a loss of revenue more than 5 million, I think that's going to resonate more with the business leaders, right? I think that kind of context and language would be articulated by a CISO from a GRC background. Yeah.
So is it like sort of like a layer of managing security as a business?
Yes, that's right. It is definitely a layer of managing security as a business. I think that's the way the industry is operating these days.
Got it.
Yeah.
GRC isn't a checkbox, it's your story. Thanks to Vijay for joining, and thanks to all of you for listening. See you next time on 10 Minutes with CISOs and Security Leaders.